essentially, our job is to be moving the customer from a state of awareness into action. And in relationship marketing, we focus not exclusively, but certainly we put great emphasis on creating action, because what we're trying to do is deliver the right messages at the right moment so that we move the customer forward through this process from need to learn to choose to use, and make sure that we're articulating the message in a correct way and making sure that we're present where the customer is looking for the information and that we expose them to the right messages at the right time. And of course, all of this is designed to build the trust that is so important in a relationship. Trust is the basis of any relationship, including both personal and a business or brand relationship. So we have to keep that in mind, making sure that we understand how the consumer is interacting with all of this. Very important step. Okay, so now let's get into the actual development of the message. In the next few minutes, we're going to be talking about creative formats, the ones that work best, size, and all of those important things to make sure that we are making the right choices, because, you know, formats do have an impact on response, on the results, and our ability to communicate a message in a very effective way. So we really need to understand how we can choose the right tools to convey the message in an effective way, and that's critically important. I find that in many cases, and I've had conversations during this tour that we're doing in the country talking about the rethinking direct mail, I'm surprised to see that many individuals are selecting formats simply based on, well, that's what everyone else is doing, or this is all we can afford, or criteria that really don't drill down to the proper selection process, where we need to be picking the formats that are going to do the right job doing the right thing for the job we have at hand. And so developing the messages is critically important. Selecting the right formats is super important. So let's look at a few. Now, you have to keep in mind that in a relationship marketing and direct response environment, you have very little time, particularly in the mail, but also in email and a few other channels. You have a very, very short space of time to capture and engage your consumer, to get their attention. You know, I think the rule of thumb is something like 3 seconds to grab someone's attention and demonstrate that you have something that's of value, that's of interest, that's relevant to the consumer. So sometimes a simple format is going to do the best job. So postcards, fundamentally the simplest tool that we have available to us. They are very simple, very little real estate available to us. So what we need to have for a postcard to work is a very strong, compelling offer. For example, in this particular example, we have a free radio receiver. You notice the green circle with the $0 in it. So it's very clear what this is all about. You get a free radio. All you have to do is respond. And the call to action is very clearly positioned at the bottom so that it stands out. It's large type. It isn't hidden. It's not integrated into the design in a way that would remove its readability. So it's very important when you're using this kind of tool to be absolutely clear and make the offer the star. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner the benchmark response rates typically associated with a postcard. The one on the first one, 1.12, is the response rate that's measured by the Direct Marketing Association, the DMA, US DMA Association, as being the typical average response rate for a postcard used in customer acquisition. The second number is 2.47 is actually the response rate associated with a mailing to an existing customer base. Now, you'll see later on that more elaborate packages typically create higher response rates. And so unless your message is extremely simple and concise and can be expressed in a few short words, you'll probably want to be using a format that is more elaborate, that provides more information. So the next step would be a self-mailer, multi-page folded document without an envelope that would typically be personalized, that would allow you to convey more information on the benefits of the product. This particular piece shows a description of some of the benefits and some of the different reasons why and the different components of the offer expressed in a multi-page document that's fairly simple to produce and yet certainly allows you to convey more information than the postcard format. And the more elaborate pieces will give you much higher response rates, especially if they're larger formats. So you'll be in the 1.4 to 3.95 range, particularly if you're using a non-letter size, more of a 6:9 format of that nature. So keeping that in mind, if you have a more complicated product, if you have more explanations to provide, then a self-mailer is going to help you to achieve that at a lower cost. Then if you have a more complex, more involved story, for example, this piece by Garnier Nutrice, it explains how to change your hair color, and that's considered to be a high-risk activity because you never know what, there's a lot of reassurance to be provided to the customer, a lot of explanation on the various steps, and choosing the right color and making sure you go through the steps of bleaching your hair to blonde and making it all very, very clear and easy to follow. So breaking it down into a multi-page booklet allows you to take a lot of information, build a story, and explain it in an easy bite-sized format. So this particular piece did much better than a previous package that was essentially a full-blown envelope mailer, just because it created a story, and it looks like a magazine, so it's a lot more fun to read than perhaps some of the more traditional pieces. Moving on, larger format, full-blown packages, for example, this one done for the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, a square format direct mail package with an integrated letter, an application form, a reply envelope, and a fairly elaborate brochure, as well as a buck slip that you see just above the business reply envelope on the right-hand side. And so this package allows you to not only create a very strong impression and continue to build the brand, but also to dramatize things like the benefits associated with the membership, which is essentially unlimited access for up to 24 months. Another way of saying a 2-year membership is available, but by creating a benefit statement out of it, it makes it a lot more compelling. And you see the response rates are typically much greater when you use an envelope package in a non-standard format. Then, of course, you can go into some things that are more along the lines of dimensionals. These are just a few examples of things that we've done over the years, and typically they are far more costly to execute, very useful in a business-to-business environment or for a high-ticket product, perhaps in automotive for high-value customers, or these two are for various products in on the left-hand side, the railroad industry, and on the right-hand side, pulp and paper. So because the high ticket is so high and the value of the customers is so great, the emphasis is placed on the outcome of what you're trying to achieve. How do you maximize your response rate when you're talking to 50, 100, 250 individuals, and the transaction value may be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars or the millions of dollars? So picking a high impact format will allow you to maximize the results. For example, the package on the right-hand side for locomotive remote control was sent out to about 50 individuals throughout North America and generated $60 million in sales. So the price tag of creating the package itself was inconsequential when compared to the overall result. Now, we don't all have the opportunity to work on such elaborate campaigns, but we should always keep in mind that what's most important is the outcome, is the response, it's the result of the campaign. The cost of generating that is less important, particularly for a high-value customer. So we can allow ourselves to indulge in something a little bit more more significant in terms of creative execution to be able to maximize the number of our customers or prospects that we want to talk to. So keeping that in mind, we have to make sure that we're investing in the right places. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, Canada Post has a dimensional service for addressed ad mail that allows you to send a box or a package up to 35 millimeters in thickness, and that's roughly 1.4 inches for those of you who, like me, were born before metric. And so interesting to know, there are some interesting opportunities to add some thickness to your piece, create some lumpiness in the envelope, taking advantage of that extra thickness. The additional cost is nominal compared to for example, a parcel post package. So it's worth exploring and looking at the possibilities of how can we create something more interesting through dimensional graphics. And one last thing before we move out of formats. Indicia is an important thing. The type of postage you'll use on your piece can have an influence on the customer interaction and the percentage of customers that are actually going to read your message. So obviously the ultimate is the postage stamp, which requires manual affixing, and of course it comes with a higher price. The lowest of all, of course, is the simple ad mail indicia. Here's a compromise between the two, which I find is very exciting. This is a new product that is in the process of being released for a custom indicia that allows you to position an image of some kind, an illustration, maybe a logo, maybe your campaign spokesperson, or maybe even a product in the indicia. And so it adds more credibility. It looks more like a real stamp. So I'm sure this will have some pretty significant impact on the overall response for campaigns. So essentially what we need to keep in mind when we think formats is that we have a very short period of time to grab the consumer's attention, make sure that they understand that this is valuable, that it's relevant, that it's for them. So using the outer envelope, using a self-mailer that has graphics on it, in most cases, not all cases of course, you will create that attention and get the customer inside your message. Size matters because the format, the size of the envelope, the format of the package will have an impact on the response rate. So you want to focus on making sure that you're using the selection that's going to produce the best result for you. And of course, depending on what you're trying to achieve, you want to use the best format for the job. So if you're doing customer acquisition, you will be using specific formats. When you're doing customer retention, you'll focus on more elaborate pieces that will generate a higher response rate overall. And then finally, last but not least, I think it's really important for all of us to remember that direct mail is really about personal connection. It's about a conversation that you're starting, that you're initiating with your customer, and that today, because of all the interactive tools we have available to us, the customer can talk back. But essentially what you're trying to do is to create a message that is very personal. So the tone, the way you write your copy, the pieces, the components that are part of that package will need to be designed so that you emphasize that personal connection. The letter, if you're using a full-blown package, will be a very important element of all of that. So that really needs to be taken into account. Now let's talk about creativity and developing the messages, and what are those famous 6 keys that I talked about earlier in developing creativity in direct and in cross-media integrated campaigns. Because of course direct mail alone today is probably not a viable option, depending on the industry of course, but typically we try and use direct mail in combination with email, in combination with social media, in combination with traditional media of course, and in combination with mobility and all of those new tools that are available to us, so that we can create more interaction, also talk to the right people at the right moment using the right tools. So one of the strengths of direct mail and relationship marketing in general is the ability to tell a story. Because we have the customers, the consumers' undivided attention for a short period of time, of course, you realize that direct mail is one of the only media that you consume all by itself. You're not watching television and seeing a TV ad. You're not navigating the web, looking at some content and having a banner ad pop up at you. So you're looking at your mail and you're being exposed to a message and you have that undivided attention. So it's a great opportunity to tell a story. And as we know today, storytelling is a very, very powerful tool that's available to us. Of course, you can do a better job perhaps of telling a story through video, but you can interact your video and interconnect it with your direct mail piece. There's still nothing to prevent you from building that story through a simple direct mail package. For example, and this is, I think, a great source of inspiration, fundraisers do a tremendous job of structuring and building a story around what they have to offer. It's not about the money that you give, it's about the impact that it produces, the good that it does in the community. So here's an example of a piece we did recently for Centraide du Grand Montréal, essentially. This is United Way of Greater Montreal. And it just tells a story around why it's important to give. This one was in particular focusing on monthly giving as opposed to an annual donation. But essentially it builds a story around it, and it tells the consumer why it's important. And we tend to forget, when we emphasize the product and the brand, we forget to emphasize the importance of why a customer should be buying this or that particular product, why they should be engaging with the brand, what's the benefit, what's the story behind it. And we need to make sure that all of the copy that we create talks about that story. Which leads us to the big question of, do we use long copy or do we use short copy? And copy length is a big issue. It's a big question. And we commonly hear clients and even consumers to say that people don't read anymore, so we need to keep it very short. We use bullet points and things like that. But in fact, the reality is customers will not read boring copy. They will not read copy that's just about you because it's all about them. So you need to use copy that is going to emphasize the value of what you have to offer, underline the relevance to them, to their situation. And when you do that, longer copy is more effective than short. Of course, you don't want to go overboard, so the ideal length is long enough to get the job done and not a word more. And that, of course, can be a challenge. But realizing that, we have to make sure we understand when to use long copy, so using it to reconfirm things that consumers may have forgotten, communicate a story that's of value to them, and explaining in more detail the why behind the product. Just a couple of examples here. This is a campaign that we did last fall for Tremblant. Very short copy. This is an email message, and it basically says you can get a season of Tremblant for $400, $3.99. Very little copy. You've got strong call to action, and there's a very, very visible deadline of 72 hours to take advantage of the offer. Call to action, order now. Very simple. But if you're talking to existing pass holders, this more elaborate piece allows you to build a story around the value of what they already have so they don't switch over to the new product. So you through the letter, using, yes, there's some bullet copy, there's some subheads that break up the paragraphs. You have some relatively short copy, but it tells a story about the value and why they should maintain their current behavior. When you're building a direct mail piece, and those of you who've never written a letter before, at least in a direct mail situation, you have to realize that there are some very important pieces of real estate in a letter that are very important, that should be leveraged effectively. Creating the subheads that convey the essence of the message so that a scan reader will very briefly, very quickly be able to get the essence of the message is very important. So being able to use bolded copy. The red here is added by me to make it stand out. It was not part of the message. So the bold text really gives you the essence of the message. And then something that we are gradually losing from our direct mail culture is the use of the PS, the postscriptum, at the end of the letter. And we know that this is actually the most read piece of copy in the entire piece, because consumers turn the letter over instinctively, if it is a two-page, of course. The eye is drawn to the signature, so you're trying to determine who's writing you. And so immediately below, the PS allows you to summarize the value of the offer and highlight the important things. In this particular case, we're kind of suggesting that they do nothing because we didn't want them to downgrade to the other product. So using all of these different components, the signatures, the PS, the bolded text, the underline, the bullets, and so on, to be able to break up the message and make it more easy to read is critically important. And, readability by far is the most important criteria when creating a direct mail package, be it a self-mailer, a postcard, or a full-blown package, or even a dimensional. Readability is the most important criteria. Now, the second thing we need to do after thinking about creating a story around our product is to build the relevance to the consumer so that they can understand why the product is right for them, why the service is right for them, why this should be what they select in their customer journey, their process. So we have to answer the famous age-old question of what's in it for me, because everyone is more concerned and rightly so, about how their purchases, how their consumption impacts their own lives, and much less about why the brand is so great. So writing copy that is very clear about customer benefits is very, very important. And so just a very simple example here to demonstrate what I'm talking about when I say benefit. This is for call it a discount card for golf at Tremblant, and the headline says, "Play more, pay less." In 4 words, you understand exactly what it's all about. The benefits are very clear. And then if you look just below in the right-hand side in that red column, the call to action is very visible. By yours, call this 800 number or go to tremblant.ca/golf. So very clear, very simple, not a lot of copy, but you understand immediately what the benefits are of this particular product. Now, helping customers make the right choices is very important because, as you know, if the customer buys the wrong product, the experience will be disappointing. So that's not great when you're trying to build a relationship. You want to make sure that the selection that is made, the choice that they make, is the right one. And so using, for example, a table of some kind, a tool to help you make the selections, make the right choices, making it perfectly clear what the difference is between one and the other, can be very helpful, very useful. Here in this particular project from Maybelline we did a few years ago, we created a beauty guide to help consumers understand how to choose makeup and how to apply it effectively to give them the look they were looking for. And so through a series of short questions, we were able to build a database of information on their preferences, their skin type, their eye color and hair color and so on, and create a unique version. This, as you see on the screen here, is a series of covers from a single issue. This is not different ones, it's all the same, but you see that the imagery is different based on your ethnicity and your makeup style and your age. We delivered some information that's totally relevant to the consumer. There were, in fact, some pages that recommended products that were based on their skin type and what the customer was looking for, what they needed to do, what they needed to choose to get the proper result. And so we had up to 3.5 million unique variations of this piece. It probably went totally overboard on that relevance, but it produced some very, very significant, huge results for them. So there's value in creating that relevance, in asking a few questions, or in analyzing the customer's purchase behavior, their past behavior through your transactional systems to understand what the customer is looking for, who they are, what they need, and then making those right recommendations. Now, of course, to be able to create strong results and impact, we need to create urgency. We need to provide the consumer, the customer, with a reason to act now, to act today. And I had a customer ask me not so long ago, maybe a month ago, you know, if we're not able to generate the proper level of response using the current price, maybe it's just because our pricing is too high. It's important to understand that it's not about what the price is, it's about creating a moment in time where the level of urgency, the risk of missing out on an opportunity is so great that the consumer will, or the customer will, be encouraged to go forward, to act now as opposed to think about it and wait for the next offer. And credibility of that statement and that offer, and the fact that it is that moment in time, a very limited time in fact, is very important. We often see brands that get caught in the trap of having the same offer over and over and over again, or an offer that lasts for a very, very extended period of time, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that that tends to reduce the level of urgency that we're creating in our message. Here's a slide that I took from Slope Fillers talking about the impact of time versus quantity as a means of generating response. And so if you look at the slide, at the top of the slide on the left-hand side, you'll see the response curve over time, over a 30-day period for a date incentive or limited time offer versus a limited quantity offer, which is the second chart, or say the second table. So you see that with the limited time offer, the response is fairly flat until the end of the promotion, where it tends to ramp up and we get the strongest response on the last day of the offer. Whereas with a limited quantity, you get your results almost immediately in a very short space of time. So over 2 days, you've generated all the results. So picking the right kind of offer is really important, depending on what channel you're using, or are you using a combination of channels. For example, a direct mail package with a limited quantity offer would be very difficult to execute because everything will happen very quickly and you'll probably disappoint a bunch of people. So using more of a time-based cutoff date is important. And having that cutoff date clearly stated in the call to action is critically important, because if the deadline is not clearly visible, then consumers will not understand the urgency of what that's all about. So keep that in mind when you're building your offers and trying to create that sense of urgency. So again, back to this slide, you have 72 hours starting today, and the price goes up on this specific date. So you really get that sense of urgency. A full season pass at Tremblant, or almost full season at $3.99, is certainly a great deal, so you want to act on it. And then you have the opportunity using email to be able to remind people throughout the campaign of the importance of that deadline. So here we have a reminder the day before the end of the offer that says you have 24 hours left. The emphasis is clearly on the offer, a very strong call to action to create that momentum and urgency. So we have to really keep that in mind and emphasize it whenever we can in our copy, in our creative, wherever we go. Now, another key to creating a compelling offer, a compelling piece, is to create some form of interaction with the package, with the card, with the component, with the dimensional, so that the customer engages and interacts with it. And that engagement and interaction heightens the interest, makes the message more effective in getting to the customer. It helps them to understand what we have to say, and creates that interaction that's so very important. So, a couple of basic things that you can do is simply to have a scratch and win or a scratch off to understand what the offer is, and create that very simple low-level interaction that's critically important. Involvement devices typically will add to your response rate to the tune of 10 to 15% typically. Some will do better, some will do worse. You have to at least cover the cost of that interactive device. The reason for that is that because you're generating more response, you're actually getting more customers to make the purchase, to make the commitment to your brand. And working with more customers up front, given the attrition that you'll see over time, it's more beneficial to have more people up front than to get them at a lower cost. So you've got to balance that out in terms of what you do when you create your piece. Here's a very interesting self-mailer that I found. This was on Ads of the World. It's by a group in South America. I believe this is Rat Collins. And essentially it's talking about a dermal weight loss patch. We all need one of those these days. At least I do. And so the interesting interaction device here is that the interesting thing is that it allows you to dramatize or bring to light the benefit of the product. So if you pull down on the tab that's on the right-hand side, you're removing the love handle with the muffin top that's bulging over your waistline. And so through that simple gesture, that simple involvement device, you're actually emphasizing the underlying benefit. So that's really neat, very well done, very simple execution where an involvement device emphasizes the benefit of the product, and that's typically what we want to do. Now, you can go to some more elaborate formats that allow you to create more engagement, more interaction, and have a lot of impact. These are some samples courtesy of Information Packaging that does some wonderful stuff. Page flips, pages that turn all by themselves as you pull on a tab. Different drawers that open up. You've got web keys built in, pop-ups and different things that just draw attention to your message, make it more interesting, more engaging, more colorful, more impactful. Of course, you also have to make sure that the copy that's there is appropriate. It's a little more difficult working with these formats, not impossible, but a little more challenging to do variations and variability. You have to go to full digital printing, which isn't a bad thing. But you have to be cognizant of the fact that out of the box, these are perhaps a little more challenging to execute, but they do provide you with a lot of impact, a lot of engagement and give you some real estate to be able to deliver the message in an effective way. Then, of course, you can add in some things that will allow you to tie the physical and digital pieces together. So you can use QR codes, and the scanning rate of QR codes is actually on the rise according to several reports where more and more customers are engaging with them. Personal URLs, we don't see enough of those, where the URL is actually an individualized or personalized web page that provides you with information that's just for you. So maybe it's a form with all the information pre-populated. Maybe it's a message that's specific and unique to you and your needs based on what you've done in terms of behavior, the questions you've answered in a survey, or things of that nature. And then finally, web keys, some great stuff to be able to interconnect a physical piece with the web, plug them into your computer, and they take you to a specific page. Some of them are programmable so that you can actually direct a different message to each individual. You can customize and personalize them in a very effective way. And all of these things taken together and give you an opportunity to create more interaction, more involvement with your message. Very important. Now, the next key is one of the unique abilities of mail is the ability to touch multiple senses simultaneously. And so, you know, you can touch, obviously, the sense of touch and sight are directly involved in a physical piece. But you can go beyond that to include taste and scent and sound, of course. And so why would you do that, and why is this important? There's a study that was done in 2009 by Millward Brown in the UK looking at the impact of physical versus digital pieces on the human brain and how it reacts to being exposed to messages through the different channels. And if you look on the left-hand side, this is done in a functional MRI chamber where a customer was exposed to a physical piece, a direct mail package with an offer, a message of some kind, and then saw the same piece in a digital format, an email presumably, and in that environment, measuring the activity in the emotional processing centers of the brain. And so on the left-hand side, you see the level of activity for a digital piece. There is some activity. It is certainly not as great as what you see on the right-hand side, where there's a lot more going on in the brain. Essentially what it's telling us is that the physical piece is more real for the consumer. So it's producing a greater, longer-lasting result. And that's really important for retention. So some of the things you can do is including scent. For example, this piece for Giorgio Armani included a flat spray sample that you could open up and spray on yourself to smell the scent itself, creating a very lasting impression. This great piece done in Germany for a book publisher was essentially a message printed on sheets of pasta and formed to create a recipe book. It was a B2B piece sent to bookstore owners. And you could then add some sauce and cheese and put it in the oven for 45 minutes at 350 and create a baked lasagna. So that interaction is incredibly interesting. And at the same time, once you've eaten the lasagna with the message on, you'll remember it for life. So very, very strong use. Now, there's another technology that's out there now that's quite interesting, and it's the integration of LCD panels, flat screen TVs if you want, into physical pieces. So you can now find this as an example that was produced by Accenture for Canada Post. And essentially, you can include a video clip with sound and imagery, of course, multiple durations, sizes from as small as 2.4 inches to as large as 10 inches, and they allow you to physically integrate video into your piece. Obviously, you're going to use these in a situation where the customer value is sufficiently great, but they're a very interesting and engaging way of getting the message across through multiple senses. Now, call to action. I've mentioned this several times, and I can't emphasize enough the importance of integrating call to action. And I've seen campaigns that have failed miserably because the call to action was buried or hidden away or put in reverse type, in reversed 8-point type in a dark background where the customer cannot see it. So, you know, this is an example of just how to express and structure the call to action so that it is clearly visible on the page. It's what you see when you've finished reading the copy. So very strong action-oriented book by, and there's the deadline is there, and the benefit of saving 30% on lodging, the channels through which you need to do it, so either web or call center. It's very clear, it's very concise, and it tells the customer exactly what you need them to do. And you know, we have a tendency to think that, you know, everyone is intelligent and enlightened, and they will know. You know, they can always look us up on Google and find the website. But no, you want to send them to a specific page. You want to tell them what you need them to do so that they will move forward in their action and through their journey. So same thing with a web call to action, very clear. Save up to $420 on the season pass. The deadline is there, and the button doesn't say submit, it says save now. So, and of course we offer the multiple channels, so even in an email message you give consumers the opportunity to use the call center as another channel for response. We have to keep in mind that the more opportunities or response channels we provide a consumer or a customer with, the greater the overall response. And although very few campaigns today actually use mail-in coupons and so on, or reply devices, there are some, but not as much as we used to see, we're depriving ourselves globally of a stronger result. So, you know, some marketers will include 3 or 4 channels, and they'll make them very clear as to all the possibilities that are available to you as a customer to be able to take advantage of this offer. It could be in-store plus call center plus the website. You may be able to send in an email. You may be able to interact in some other way with the brand. And so that allows you to create those the more opportunities to respond. The more you have, the better it is. So in essence, those 6 keys to summarize essentially is: remember to tell a story. Tell customers, consumers, why you want them to buy, why it's important, why it's relevant, what the benefits are going to be. Create the relevance by customizing the message, personalizing the message as much as possible. Personalization is not about adding a person's name multiple times. It's about providing a message that's relevant for them. Build the urgency through a strong offer. Make sure that it's not something that's going to be available consistently over time. Stimulate the interaction, touch multiple senses, and last but certainly not least, call to action in a very strong way. So there you have it in 46 odd minutes, the basics of DM creative in a nutshell. Hopefully this has been valuable to all the participants. Rodrigo?
Yes, we are going into our Q&A phase. As I mentioned previously, you can type your question in the question panel. Mark cannot read the questions. I have access to the questions, so I shall read them out to him. There was a question earlier, Mark. Somebody did not have a chance to see the response rate for the self-mailer. She wanted to see if you could look that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've tested self-mailer against full-blown package on multiple occasions, and what we see is always consistently a lift in response of 20 to 40% between a self-mailer, same offer, same visuals, and so on, and a full-blown package. So the full-blown package, letter, envelope, brochure of some kind, maybe a buck slip, maybe a reply device of some kind, gives you a much better response rate. So what the numbers are specifically, I can't give you a benchmark response based on the DMA's results because they didn't measure that. But I can tell you from past personal experience that your self-mailer is going to underperform your direct mail package by a certain percentage. So the lift, because we've measured it in the other direction, the lift is 20 to 40% overall.
All right, so I'm getting some questions. People are typing in some questions. Jonathan wants to know, let me see, do you have any suggestions with addressed DM campaigns versus unaddressed?
Okay, so addressed direct mail and unaddressed direct mail are 2 very different tools, and the response rates are going to be vastly different. As a matter of fact, you can pretty much figure that your response rate is going to be 4 to 5 times greater with addressed ad mail versus unaddressed ad mail. You're going to want to use unaddressed ad mail when you are basically fishing within a geographic area where you are talking to all consumers, because the penetration of the product that you're selling is sufficiently great to be able to talk to everyone and find enough consumers that are going to find it relevant. Addressed ad mail is very powerful in talking to a smaller number of individuals that have an identifiable behavior. For example, an interest in skiing or outdoors or any given activity, that have a potential need for a specific product or service based on their behavior. You certainly want to be using addressed direct mail to talk to existing customers, because it would make no sense to use unaddressed to speak to them. You have that relationship, you have that knowledge, and you want to take advantage of it. So unaddressed is a great way of doing, for example, drive to web, drive to store, bringing people into a location, identifying, shopping for, or attracting new customers, doing some acquisition or doing some traffic building. So very effective for there. If you want to be more focused and targeted, you would want to use the addressed direct mail instead.
Great. Crystal wants to know, can you provide another example of how we could ensure our program incorporates the quote-unquote touch the senses point?
Another example, there are many of them. Obviously sense of taste. Sense of smell we don't use enough of, and I've seen some great examples recently incorporating scent, building a themed message around scent and integrating it into the package. Obviously adding video will give you that as well. There was a super campaign that I saw by the Royal Mail in the UK that used a chocolate letter, and that was very unusual. They actually imprinted the letter copy into the sheet of chocolate, sent that out to, I believe that was B2B, obviously, and you could then read the message and then consume it after the fact. So very interesting to be able to do that. And it can be candies, it can be, I use chocolate extensively because I enjoy it so much. But any kind of edible certainly adds some memorableness. That's not a word, but I just made that up. And so that kind of stuff. And it can be as simple as adding in new car spray. That scent does exist. And, if you're promoting a new car and you have the envelope smell like new car leather or something like that, that's a way of creating that. So very simple stuff.
I have an interesting question from Rick. Any research shows that multiple pieces in a direct mail piece increases overall response rates?
Yes, definitely. Is it objective research or common knowledge by people who've been doing it for a long time? I guess a bit of both. I don't have an official number to give you. I do know that the more pieces, more relevant pieces, the greater the interaction, and thereby the greater the response rate overall. To a point. Some of them get so cluttered that you can't really follow the message. But in theory, the more a customer plays around with your piece, the greater the interest, the engagement, and the greater the overall outcome. To a point, of course. So adding in a buck slip, adding in something that will draw attention to a specific feature, to a part of the offer, things like that will have an impact on the response.
Perfect.
At least typically.
I'm getting a few questions on whether the presentation will be available. Yes, it will be available. A digital copy will be available. I'm also getting a lot of questions on the customized indicia, when it's available, how it's printed. It is available as of now, I believe. And don't worry, for everyone that's asked a question on the indicia, we will get somebody from Canada Post will get back to you with a more detailed response. Let me see, there's some more questions here. From your experience, this is Susan, from your experience, does including a clip seal on a self-mailer improve or lower response? Do you know what a clip seal is?
Yes, I do. I know what a clip seal is, absolutely. And there's something, I'm not going to say magical, but certainly involving in the noise that it makes when you tear it open. So there's, I think it improves it without exaggerating. I know multiple clip seals can create a barrier, and they have to be easy to work with. Some of them are just, you have to fight with them to get your piece open. So I believe that they do add something because they kind of convey the idea of something being slightly confidential, that it's not open and available to everyone. So personal opinion, I think they do have a positive impact.
All right. I have Noor here from Northwestel. He's asking what dimension of direct mail piece is considered effective?
Well, as it wasn't totally clear, I apologize for that. The differential between the response rates based on format, but if I'm just going to quote the DMA statistics for a moment. In a typical direct mail package, a number 10 size, so the standard business envelope format that is 4 1/8 by 9 1/2, gives you an average to an existing customer, gives you an average of 3.4% response. And this is a national average. For an oversize, so anything that is larger than a number 10, so maybe a 6 by 9, for example, or a square format 6 by 6, gives you an average response rate of 3.95, so let's call that 4%. So there's a quite significant differential between the two sizes. And then when you go to the postcard, you're dropping that response rate to 2.47 on average. So there's a significant gap. You're giving up a pretty significant response differential there. It's costing you orders to save the money on that postcard. So maybe not the best tool for customer retention, but in customer acquisition, the differential isn't that great because a standard package is at 1.2 and a postcard is at 1.12, so 1.12 versus 1.20. Not a big difference there. So understanding who you're talking to is important, using the right format to maximize your response rate, because that's really what the game is all about. Driving costs down is interesting as long as it doesn't drive out response, because at the end of the day you want more customers, and if you're talking to existing customers, you don't want to pass up the opportunity to be able to maximize the number of existing customers that continue to buy from you.
So we have 2 more minutes left on our webinar. I have an interesting question from Abraham. He's thinking of doing a marketing campaign with Publisac. Is it possible to explain the advantage with direct mail?
Well, obviously addressed direct mail is going to be the way to go if your product is something that is targetable. If it is directed to a customer base that is specifically identifiable, where the proportion in the overall population is perhaps not as great as it would be elsewhere. So if you are a retailer, you would, and to be able to use unaddressed ad mail to be able to drive business to your place of business, obviously creating traffic. Unaddressed ad mail has an advantage of being able to reach both apartments and homes. So that can be very, very important to be able, if you're talking to a younger audience or an audience that is essentially people who live in apartments and condos and things like that, there's that difference between the two that is going to give you more impact. I believe personally that is going to have a significant impact. And we did some tests for one of our clients looking at both opportunities, and there was a certain lift in going with addressed ad mail versus Publisac. But it all depends. I mean, you have to look at the different possibilities. There's no black or white answer in all of those things. I think the difference really is the deliverability at the apartment level.
And if I could just add, as a Canada Post advocate here and as a Canada Post employee, a question of clutter also. I mean, Publisac, on average, they have 18 to 20 different ads per issue. And in your mailbox, the average ads that you'll find in a mailbox is 2 per day. So there's
absolutely.
So if you do want to stand out, the mailbox might be a better route.
Very valid point.
There's a few more questions, but I'm gonna end because it is now 1 o'clock. If you could just bring your slide to the conclusion, to the next slide.
Yes,
Mark.
of course. Great. And let me take the opportunity to thank our sponsors, both Canada Post, particularly Canada Post, for making all of this possible, but also XMPie that creates the technology behind all the variable content. Xerox Canada, who's been a very strong proponent of this marketing initiative across Canada, and the Low Martin Group, who are also a major sponsor of this initiative, this Rethinking Direct Mail. And unplanned, but I just had a thought. If any of you want to continue to deepen your understanding of direct mail creative or production or targeting or strategy, there are workshops available to agencies, and you can talk to your Canada Post representative to find out more details, or go to canadapost.ca/directmailworks.
Perfect. So thank you, Mark, for a great presentation on using creativity and direct mail in an integrated marketing context. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, I will be sending a link to a copy of the PowerPoint presentation and a copy of the recorded webinar, so you can download it at your convenience. So this concludes Canada Post webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you are registered for our upcoming webinars in this series. Our second webinar is called Direct Mail Strategy and Cross-Media Marketing, and it will help you understand the why and the how behind customer-centric, relationship-focused marketing, its key drivers and success factors. It's going to be held on Wednesday, June 5th from 12 to 1 p.m. This webinar will also be presented by Marc Morin. For those who are interested, I'll be sending a link to the registration form in my follow-up email. So on behalf of Mark, on behalf of our sponsors, we wish you a great day and talk to you soon.